I never imagined that a simple, thrill-seeking adventure could shatter the fragile boundaries of my reality. But nothing about that night, or the cursed asylum that haunted my dreams thereafter, remained ever simple. I'll never forget the bitter chill that seeped into my bones as I stepped through the rusted iron gate, the weight of ancient secrets bearing down on me before I'd even set foot inside. I was once part of a small group of urban explorers, friends who shared my hunger for the unknown. We'd heard whispers about the abandoned Ravenswood asylum, a relic of forgotten horrors from decades past. Some said the place was cursed. Others believed that what once transpired within its crumbling walls was too monstrous to speak of. We were drawn by morbid curiosity, dismissing the warnings as superstitious ramblings. But as I soon discovered, some doors once opened can never be closed again. The drive to Ravenswood was filled with uneasy silence, even though our small van was filled with the muffled laughter and nervous banter of my companions. An undercurrent of dread ran through each conversation. I remember the half-smiles and furtive glances that betrayed a shared premonition. We arrived at dusk, the sky painted in bruised purples and angry reds, as if the heavens themselves mourned the sins of that forsaken place. Standing before the asylum, I marveled at its derelict beauty. The towering structure with its shattered windows and sagging roof seemed to breathe in the gloom. The ornate wrought iron gates creaked open like a warning as we stepped onto the property. My heart pounded, not just with fear but with a relentless curiosity, a desire to uncover the story hidden in the decaying walls. Inside, the corridors reeked of mildew and decay, and the silence was oppressive. Every step I took echoed through empty halls lined with peeling wallpaper and broken fixtures. I felt a presence, a cold, relentless gaze that followed my every movement. I chalked it up to my imagination, spurred on by the asylum's notorious reputation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. I was the last to sleep that night in one of the larger rooms we'd claimed as our temporary base. The others had already dozed off, lulled by exhaustion and the adrenaline of our escapade. I lay on an old cot, the thin mattress doing little to buffer the hard, uneven floor. Sleep was elusive. Every creak and whisper made me sit up, straining my eyes to catch the source of the disturbance. At around 2 a.m. I woke to a sound, a soft shuffling noise that seemed to come from the corridor outside my room. My heart pounded as I listened. It was as if footsteps padded slowly toward my door. I sat frozen, listening, until the sound faded away. I wanted to wake the others, to share my terror, but something deep within me hesitated. I felt that if I acknowledged the supernatural presence, it might set it free. Instead, I pulled the thin blanket over my head and tried to pretend that nothing was amiss. But that night, as I drifted between half sleep and full awareness, I saw fleeting images of a gaunt figure lurking at the edge of my vision, a shadow with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. I don't know if it was merely a trick of the dark, or a manifestation of the asylum's malevolence. I awoke, drenched in sweat. The image burned into my mind like a scar. The following morning, our group gathered in a circle in the main atrium, a vast, broken hall dominated by a once grand staircase. We spoke in hushed tones about the strange occurrences. Some of my friends recounted their own inexplicable experiences, whispers in the dark, doors slamming shut on their own, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. I tried to share my terror, but my words fell flat in the face of our collective skepticism. We were all trying to rationalize the inexplicable, to dismiss our fears as mere nerves. That afternoon, we decided to venture deeper into the asylum, exploring rooms that had long been forgotten. I volunteered to lead a small subgroup, armed with flashlights and a shared sense of purpose. As we navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the air grew colder, and an oppressive sense of doom enveloped us. Every step seemed to echo, and the darkness seemed almost alive, swirling around us like a malevolent mist. We entered a room that appeared to be a long-forgotten office. Papers were strewn about, and a large, dusty desk dominated the center of the room. There, amid the clutter, I found an old journal. Its leather cover was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. Something compelled me to read its contents, and I couldn't help but be drawn into the agonizing narrative of a doctor who had once run the asylum. The journal detailed experiments meant to cure the patients through extreme, unorthodox means. The doctor's handwriting was frantic, the ink smudged by tears or blood, I couldn't be sure. He wrote about voices that tormented him, about shadows that whispered secrets of unspeakable horrors. As I read, I felt an increasing dread. The final entry was the most disturbing of all. It spoke of a ritual, a desperate attempt to bind a dark force that had taken residence in the asylum. The entry ended abruptly, the last words smeared as if written in a frantic haste. "It is already here." I tucked the journal into my backpack, unable to shake the sensation that I was being watched. When I turned back to the group, I found their faces drained of color. They too had begun to sense the malignant presence that permeated the asylum. And then the nightmare truly began. That night, the asylum transformed. The familiar corridors twisted into grotesque shapes, the walls seemed to pulse, and the whispers grew louder. I was separated from the others in the chaos. I remember running blindly through hallways that morphed before my eyes, the sound of distant screams mingling with my own ragged breaths. The floor beneath me felt like a living thing, its surface shifting and undulating as if trying to swallow me whole. In the darkness, I glimpsed figures, pale, emaciated shapes with hollow eyes and twisted limbs, lurking at the edges of my vision. They moved with an unnatural fluidity, as though dancing to a macabre tune. Each time I tried to focus on them, they vanished, leaving me to wonder if they were real or mere hallucinations born of terror. I clutched my flashlight tightly, its beam flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. I finally found refuge in a small, isolated room. There I barricaded the door and sat against it, trembling and alone. My mind raced with fragments of the journal's horrific contents. I began to suspect that the asylum's curse wasn't limited to its walls, that it had somehow seeped into our very souls. I scribbled frantically in a notebook, trying to capture every detail before it slipped away, before I lost myself entirely to the darkness. Time became meaningless in that oppressive solitude. The hours blurred together, each moment punctuated by the sounds of scraping and whispering and the occasional distant wail that seemed to come from the depths of the building. I realized with a sinking dread that I was no longer safe within these walls. Something was hunting me, a force beyond human comprehension, driven by a hunger for despair and suffering. I tried to recall the faces of my friends, hoping to find some comfort in their shared strength, but their memories were quickly being replaced by a sense of overwhelming isolation. I was alone with the asylum's malevolence, a prisoner of my own making. The whispers grew louder, becoming a cacophony of voices that taunted and scolded me. They spoke of sins I'd committed, of failures and weaknesses that I had long tried to forget. Each word felt like a physical blow, shattering the fragile hope I had left. In a fevered state, I recalled the journal's description of the ritual, the desperate attempt by the doctor to bind the dark force that resided within these walls. I couldn't tell if I was grasping at a solution or merely spiraling deeper into madness, but I knew I had to act. I searched the room for any clues that might help me piece together the ritual. Among scattered papers and broken objects, I found a small, ornate box. Its carvings were intricate and disturbing, depicting scenes of suffering and despair. Inside the box lay a collection of strange artifacts, a tattered piece of cloth stained with what appeared to be blood, a rusted key, and a few brittle pages filled with arcane symbols. The pages hinted at an incantation, a plea to force the entity back into the void from whence it came. The text was fragmented, and I wasn't sure if I understood its full meaning, but desperation lent me the courage to try. With trembling hands, I set up a makeshift circle in the center of the room, using chalk and the artifacts I'd found. The air thickened, and an unnatural cold seeped into my bones as I began to recite the words, my voice echoing off the decaying walls. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, The atmosphere shifted. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, and the whispers momentarily stilled. For a brief, terrifying moment, I felt as if I had gained control, as if I had managed to contain the darkness. But that feeling was fleeting. As I continued the incantation, the temperature plummeted further, and the walls seemed to close in on me. The darkness responded, swirling into a vortex of malevolent energy that swallowed the feeble light of my candle. In that moment, I realized the terrible truth. The ritual was not a binding, but a summoning. The doctor's desperate attempt to control the curse had instead opened a gateway for it to enter our world with renewed vigor. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before, accusing me of failing where the doctor had once failed. My heart pounded as I understood that I had unwittingly become the catalyst for the entity's release. The asylum itself seemed to come alive that night. The corridors twisted into endless labyrinths, each turn leading me deeper into a realm where time and space had no meaning. I wandered for what felt like hours, disoriented by the constant shifting of the building's structure. Every door I opened led to rooms that were more grotesque and otherworldly than the last. The walls bled with dark stains, and spectral figures moved in the periphery, their eyes filled with a sorrow that was all too human. In one particularly harrowing moment, I found myself in what appeared to be a patient ward. The room was filled with rusted hospital beds, each one occupied by a ghostly figure that stared vacantly ahead. Their faces were contorted in expressions of agony and despair, as if they were trapped in an eternal cycle of torment. I tried to reach out to one to offer some semblance of comfort, but my hand passed right through the apparition. Their silent screams reverberated in my mind, a reminder of the unspeakable horrors that had taken place here. I pushed onward, driven by a desperate need to escape the asylum's clutches, to find a way back to sanity. But as I navigated the ever-changing halls, I became increasingly aware that escape was a mere illusion. The asylum had a will of its own, a dark consciousness that fed on fear and despair. Every step I took only deepened my entanglement with its malignant spirit. I began to see my own reflection in every broken mirror and shattered window, each time a little less human, a little more like the tortured souls that haunted these corridors. As I stumbled through the darkness, memories of my past life began to blur with the present. I recalled moments of joy, the faces of my friends, the warmth of human connection, but they all seemed so distant now, like fragments of a dream that had long since faded away. The entity's influence was seeping into my mind, turning my thoughts against me. I could no longer distinguish between reality and hallucination, between the memories of who I had been and the monster I was becoming. I eventually reached a large, cavernous room that appeared to be the heart of the asylum. In the center of the space stood a massive, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and distorted. Drawn to it as if by some irresistible force, I approached. In the reflection, I saw not just my own face, but a multitude of others, faces contorted in agony, eyes pleading for release. I realized with a cold dread that this mirror was a window into the asylum's tortured past, a portal through which the souls of the damned were trapped for eternity. At that moment, the entity made itself known. The mirror's surface shattered, and from the jagged edges emerged a figure. A tall, gaunt being with eyes like burning coals and a presence that radiated pure malice. It advanced slowly, each step measured and deliberate, as if savoring the moment before its final, inevitable strike. I tried to back away, but my legs refused to move, as if rooted to the spot by fear and resignation. The creature spoke in a voice that seemed to come from every corner of the room at once. "You have opened the gate. There is no escape now." Its words reverberated through my soul, shattering any remaining hope I might have clung to. I knew in that instant that the asylum had claimed me. I had become a part of its curse, a living embodiment of its dark legacy. The ensuing hours, or perhaps minutes, for time had lost all meaning, were a blur of torment and violence. The entity circled me, its presence a constant reminder of the horror I had unleashed. I tried to fight back, to run or to scream, but every attempt was futile against the overwhelming force of the curse. The walls around me seemed to close in, the oppressive darkness swallowing all light and hope. In one final act of desperation, I reached out for the journal I had found earlier, the one that documented the doctor's failed ritual. My trembling fingers traced the faded words as I tried to decipher any clue that might help me undo the mistake I had made. But the text was a jumble of madness, a chaotic litany of despair that only served to reinforce the inevitability of my fate. The entity's laughter echoed in the chamber, a sound so cold and merciless that it stripped away the last vestiges of my sanity. I realized then that the curse was not something that could be fought or undone. It was a force of nature, an ancient malice that existed beyond the realms of human comprehension. I had meddled with powers far beyond my control, and now I was paying the ultimate price. As the creature drew closer, I felt my strength waning. The agony was indescribable, a relentless assault on every nerve, every fiber of my being. I closed my eyes, accepting the darkness that was overtaking me. In my final moments of lucidity, I recalled the faces of my friends and the promise of freedom we had once shared. But those memories, once so precious, now felt hollow, swallowed by the insatiable void that had become my world. The creature's final words echoed in my mind as the darkness claimed me. Your soul belongs to the asylum now. And with that, I was consumed. I do not know how long it has been since that night, the moment when the cursed asylum claimed me. I write these words as a final confession, a desperate attempt to warn anyone who might one day wander into this forsaken place. My body is long gone, absorbed into the malevolent essence of Ravenswood, but my spirit remains, a silent witness to the horror that continues to unfold. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I catch glimpses of my own reflection in a shattered mirror or a pool of stagnant water. In those moments, I see the haunted eyes of someone who once believed in hope, now forever trapped in a cycle of despair. I hear the echoes of my own screams, intermingled with the anguished cries of countless others who have fallen victim to the asylum's curse. There is no redemption here, no comforting light to chase away the darkness. Ravenswood stands as a monument to suffering, a place where the sins of the past continue to fester and multiply. I have seen the true face of the supernatural, a force that cares not for life or death, only for the endless perpetuation of terror. To those who might read these words, I offer a simple plea. Do not seek out the asylum. Let its dark legend remain undisturbed, a warning etched into the annals of human folly. For once you step through those cursed gates, there is no turning back. The darkness will claim you, as it claimed me, and you will be lost in its endless night. As I fade into the oblivion of Ravenswood, I am left with only a bitter truth. Sometimes the thirst for knowledge, for a glimpse into the forbidden, comes at the highest cost, and there is no salvation in the face of true, unyielding horror. I am now a part of that legacy, a whisper in the corridors of the cursed asylum, a ghost doomed to wander its halls for all eternity. And as the asylum continues to lure unsuspecting souls into its embrace, I can only watch in silent despair, forever condemned by my own reckless curiosity.